You were never going to use it anyway. Your brother has a family to feed. That's just how it works. My mother said it the way people announce the weather. Flat, certain. Like the decision had already been filed away and I was simply the last one to receive the memo. I stood in the kitchen doorway, still in my coat, bag over my shoulder, having driven 4 hours to surprise my parents for their anniversary weekend. The surprise, it turned out, was mine. I looked at my phone. I had opened my Chase investment account on the drive up, at a rest stop, just to check a pending dividend. The number I saw wasn't the number I remembered. It was smaller, by $380,000. I hadn't said anything yet. I just walked in. And my mother had looked up from the stove, read something in my face, and decided to get ahead of it. Your brother needed a down payment. The house in Scottsdale. You know how the market is. We didn't think you'd even notice for a while. I set my bag down on the floor very slowly. How did you access my account, Mom? She turned back to the stove. Your father still has the login, from when you were in college. We helped you set it up, remember? I did remember. I was 19. I'd been sitting at the kitchen table with my dad, who insisted on knowing every financial detail of my life because, as he said then, I was still under his roof and his responsibility. I had moved out 2 months later. I was now 31, and apparently the login credentials had never stopped being used. You transferred $380,000 out of my investment account, I said, and my voice came out so calm I almost didn't recognize it. To pay for Marcus's house. It's a loan, she said, in the tone people use when they're describing something that is absolutely not a loan. I didn't answer. I pulled out my phone and walked to the back porch. The November air hit me like a wall. I stood there looking at the dead garden, and I called my attorney. She picked up on the second ring. Claire, I've been waiting for you to call. She already knew. Because 3 weeks earlier, when I had noticed a smaller discrepancy, $12,000 gone, which my mother had explained as a temporary borrow for my brother's medical bills, I had quietly placed a monitoring alert on the account and given my attorney a heads up that something was wrong. I hadn't wanted to believe it would go further. It had gone much further. Pull the trigger, I said. Already drafted, she said. I'll file in the morning. I hung up and stood on the porch for another minute. The kitchen light was warm through the window. I could see my mother moving around in there, stirring something, completely unbothered. My father would be in the living room, watching football, waiting for dinner. My brother was probably in Scottsdale right now, walking through rooms he couldn't afford, paid for with money I had spent 12 years building, quietly, carefully. While my family told me I worked too much and needed to loosen up and why didn't I come home more often. I went back inside. I ate dinner. I smiled when my father told a joke. I helped clear the table. And I drove home that same night, 4 hours back in the dark, with a plan I had been hoping I'd never have to use. By Monday morning, the account was frozen. The call came at 7:52 a.m. It was my father. What did you do to the account? No hello. No how are you? Just that. I protected my assets, I said. Which is something I should have done a long time ago. Claire. His voice dropped into the register he used when he wanted to sound reasonable. We were going to pay it back. Your brother is getting back on his feet. He needed help and you have more than enough. You're single, you don't have kids, you're not carrying anybody but yourself. We made a judgment call as a family. There it was again. Family. The word they used like a skeleton key, like it unlocked every room and excused every entry. You accessed a financial account that doesn't belong to you, I said. Without my knowledge or consent. That's not a family decision. That's wire fraud. Silence. Don't be dramatic, he finally said. I'm not being dramatic, Dad. I'm being accurate. My attorney filed this morning. The freeze is in place pending investigation. I'd suggest you speak to Marcus and figure out how quickly that money can be returned, because the longer this takes, the worse it gets for both of you. He started to say something else. I said goodbye and ended the call. Marcus called at 9:15. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 9:47, then my mother at 10:03. Then Marcus again at 10:30, and this time I picked up because I had already said everything I needed to say to my parents, and I wanted to hear what my brother would offer. What he offered was noise. A lot of it. "You're going to destroy this family over money? You have so much and I have nothing, Claire. I have 2 kids. I have a wife. I have a mortgage I can barely cover, and you're sitting on almost $500,000 in a single account like some kind of..." "Marcus." I waited until he stopped. "I'm going to explain something to you once. That account is my retirement fund. I've been contributing to it since I was 22. Every dollar in it came from 12 years of 60-hour work weeks while you were doing other things. I didn't ask you to consult me before having children. I didn't ask you to consult me before buying a house in one of the most expensive markets in the country. I did not ask to be consulted before you bought a boat last summer. You made your choices. This is mine." "The boat was a gift," he said, which was such an unbelievable response that I actually had to take the phone away from my ear for a moment. "Get the money back into my account within 14 days, I said. "That's the window my attorney gave me to withdraw the complaint before it escalates. After 14 days, I can't stop what happens next." "You'd actually do that? To your own brother?" "You actually did this to your own sister," I said. "So yes." I hung up and made myself a cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table and breathed. I had been the quiet one my whole life. The one who studied when Marcus partied, who saved when he spent, who planned when he improvised. I was the one who didn't need help because I never seemed to need anything, which my family had interpreted to mean I didn't feel anything either. The invisible daughter. The self-sufficient one. The one who could handle it. They were right that I could handle it. They had just never stopped to wonder what handling it actually cost. My mother texted at noon. It said, "I hope you're proud of yourself. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof." I read it and put my phone face down and went back to work. The next few days were a particular kind of quiet that felt like the moment before a storm changes direction. My attorney kept me updated. The bank's fraud investigation unit had flagged the transaction independently, which meant it was no longer just my complaint, it was their process now too, running parallel. My parents had retained a lawyer, which told me they understood the situation was serious, even if they were still pretending otherwise. On Wednesday, I drove to my parents' house unannounced. Not for drama. I went because I needed to deliver something in person, and I wanted to look my father in the eye when I did it. The drive was the same 4 hours it had always been. I grew up in that house. I knew every exit on that highway. I had driven it for Thanksgivings and Christmases and my grandmother's funeral, and every time Marcus needed someone to talk him down from whatever edge he'd wandered to. I had always come when they needed me. It had simply never occurred to any of them to wonder what I might need. My mother opened the door. She looked tired and startled and then quickly rearranged her face into something harder. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I need 5 minutes with Dad." She stepped back. I walked through the living room. My father was in his armchair, a legal pad on his knee with some notes he'd clearly been making. His new lawyer's doing, probably. He looked up when I walked in and something moved across his face that might have been shame if it had stayed longer. I sat down across from him and placed a folder on the coffee table. "This is a complete accounting," I said, "of every transfer made from my Chase account over the past 4 years. The $380,000 from last month. The $12,000 in September. A $47,000 transfer in March of last year that I initially attributed to a bank error because I couldn't bring myself to believe what it actually was. And a $19,000 withdrawal from 3 years ago that coincided with Marcus buying his wife's engagement ring." My father's jaw tightened. He didn't say anything. "Total. $458,000, I said. "That's what I'm seeking in restitution, plus filing costs and attorney fees. If Marcus returns the funds within the 14-day window, the criminal complaint gets withdrawn. You and Mom won't face charges because you didn't benefit financially from the transfers, but I want it on record that you facilitated them, and that the login credentials you held were never authorized for use after I turned 21. We didn't know about all of those, my father said quietly. Yes, you did, I said. There was no anger in my voice. I had burned through the anger 3 days ago on a dark highway, and there was nothing left but the facts. You helped Marcus the first time, and then you helped him again and again, and then he did it himself because he knew the information and he knew you wouldn't stop him. You built this, Dad. Maybe not on purpose, but you built it. His mouth opened. Closed. I love you, I said. That's not gone. But I'm done being the family's savings account. And I'm done being the daughter who disappears quietly so everyone else can be comfortable. I stood up. I picked up the folder. I had a copy and my attorney had the originals. My mother appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were red. You could have just asked us to talk, she said. You didn't have to involve lawyers. I tried to talk 3 months ago, I said. When I noticed the first discrepancy and you told me I must have miscalculated. Do you remember that? She looked at the floor. I tried to talk, Mom. Nobody wanted to. I left. I drove 2 hours and stopped at a rest stop and sat in my car and ate a gas station sandwich and watched the trucks go by on the interstate and felt, for the first time in months, like I could breathe. Marcus called on day 11. His voice was different. Quieter. I'm going to pay it back, he said. The full 380. I talked to the bank and I'm going to pull equity against the house. All 458, I said. Not just the most recent transfer. Allons pause. Claire, you had 11 days to do the math, Marcus. I've already done mine. All 458 within 72 hours, and I'll withdraw the complaint. Another pause. Then, fine. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me, he said, and he sounded exhausted and ashamed, and something else I couldn't quite name. Maybe the specific weight of realizing you have been a person you didn't know you were capable of being. I'm not thanking you for paying it back, I said. I'm thanking you for not making me finish this. I didn't want to. I want you to know that. He didn't respond for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, I know. The transfer cleared 70 hours later. I watched it arrive in my account like watching a window get unboarded, the light coming back slowly, not all at once. My attorney filed the withdrawal of the criminal complaint that afternoon. The bank's independent investigation remained open for another 30 days per their protocol, but my piece of it was done. I sat with that for a while. Not celebrating. Not crying. Just sitting. My aunt, my mother's younger sister, the one who had always existed slightly outside the family's gravitational pull, sent me a text that evening. She had figured out something was happening from the edges of the family group chat going unusually quiet. You okay? She asked. I'm okay, I wrote back. Better than okay, actually. She sent back. Good. You always held that family together with your bare hands and nobody said thank you once. I noticed. I should have said it sooner. I stared at that for a long time. Then I put my phone down and looked around my apartment. My quiet, small, entirely mine apartment. The one my brother had called depressing because it was a 1-bedroom. The one my mother had called lonely because I didn't have a husband to fill the other rooms. The one my father had called a waste of my potential because I hadn't bought something bigger, something that signaled status, something that would make them proud at dinner parties. It had good light in the mornings. I had a plant on the windowsill that I had managed not to kill for 2 years. There was a bookshelf I'd built myself and a coffee maker I'd saved up for and a desk where I worked and thought and planned and, apparently, quietly built an entire legal strategy when the people I loved decided I wasn't paying close enough attention. I liked it in here. I had always liked it in here. I just hadn't let myself say so out loud. 3 weeks after the transfer cleared, I got a call from a women's financial wellness nonprofit I had donated to for several years. They were organizing a series of workshops on financial literacy and independence for women in their 20s and 30s, and someone on their board, I still don't know who, had recommended me as a speaker. They wanted to know if I'd be interested in sharing my experience with financial management, account protection, and navigating financial violation within families. I said yes without thinking about it. The workshop was held on a Saturday morning in February in a community center with big windows and folding chairs, and about 40 women seated in rows with notebooks on their knees. Some of them were young, early 20s. Some were my age or older. A few had children with them. One woman in the third row had the same look I recognized from my own face in the mirror a few months ago, something tightly held, something being carefully managed, something that had been told too many times that it was overreacting. I didn't talk about revenge. I didn't talk about my brother by name or my parents or any of the specific details. I talked about what it means to treat your financial accounts like a private document, something no one else has access to regardless of whether they once helped you open it. I talked about the specific vulnerability that happens inside families, where love gets used as a master key. I talked about the moment I had stood in my parents' kitchen in my coat and understood that the only reason I didn't have a plan already was because I had kept hoping I wouldn't need one. The lesson I keep coming back to, I said, toward the end, is that protecting yourself is not the same as betraying the people you love. You can love someone completely and still refuse to be the person they drain. Those two things are not in conflict. They just feel that way when you've been taught your whole life that love requires you to disappear. The room was very quiet. The woman in the third row had stopped taking notes. She was just watching me. When I made eye contact with her, she gave me a small, quick nod. Like she recognized something. I nodded back. Afterward, a younger woman came up to me, maybe 24, and she asked how I had stayed so calm. How I had sat at that dinner table and eaten and smiled and not said a word. I had already done the thing that mattered, I told her. So there was nothing left to prove at dinner. She thought about that. Then she said, I think someone in my family has been doing something similar to me. I haven't wanted to look directly at it. You don't have to look at it tonight, I said. But when you're ready, look. Don't look away just because it's going to hurt. She wrote something in her notebook and thanked me and went back to her seat. I drove home in the late winter afternoon, the sky, the color of old pewter, the streets still patchy with the last of the season's snow. My phone had 2 missed calls from my mother, which I noted and set aside. We were in the early stages of something that might eventually be a different kind of relationship, smaller, cleaner, with actual edges, but we weren't there yet. Maybe we would get there. Maybe we wouldn't. I was done deciding that timeline for her. I got home. I made tea. I sat by the window and watched the last of the light go out of the sky. For as long as I could remember, I had believed that the way to survive my family was to be indispensable and invisible at the same time. To be the one who held things together so seamlessly that no one ever noticed the effort. To earn my place by never asking for anything and never complaining about anything and never, under any circumstances, costing them the way they had always quietly cost me. What I know now is that invisibility is not a survival strategy. It is just a slower way of disappearing. I didn't disappear. I came back. I used everything they'd underestimated about me, and I came back with documents and a timeline and a 14-day window and a voice I had been saving up for a very long time. They thought the quiet meant I had nothing left to say. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about most things, actually. But that one most of all.